Sony has a lot of different lenses names now. I believe at the time of filming there's like over 60 lenses. I mean, maybe more. And that's just the E-mount. Wait, what? I thought they only had one mount. No, there's actually two. So in today's video, I'm going to familiarize you with the lens hierarchy and what lenses are what in the Sony system. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Malcolm Walker and I'd like to thank you for checking out today's video. And welcome you to subscribe if you haven't already. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. It's nice to see you again. So let's get into this crazy naming and lens hierarchy that Sony has going on. It can be quite confusing for somebody new to the brand. So let's start with a bit of history on the lens lineup, as we'll need to go back about 37 years, but I promise to be quick and get to the good stuff soon. Sony has two main mounts we will discuss: the more familiar and modern E mount for the mirrorless system and the older DSLR A mount. Sony first bought out Konica Minolta's SLR business in 2005. That's when Sony got serious about getting into the high-end camera market. Now, they've always been dabbling with digital cameras. In fact, they were one of the first ones to develop a digital camera all the way back in 1981. Now, with that purchase from Konica Minolta, they got several things that would continue to be used. The first thing was the A mount itself. This was first introduced by Konica Minolta back in 1985. It was the first mount that used in-body autofocus system. Sony continued to use this mount with their introduction of their DSLR cameras all the way up to recently in May of 2021, when they fully discontinued the A mount and the DSLR line. Now, this camera right here is one of the original Minolta A mount bodies with in-body autofocus, a Maxim 7000. Now, this camera came out in 1985 with this A mount right here. And the A mount would continue to be used. This mount was used by Sony all the way up until 2021. This mount's been around for about 37 years, and there was a lot of lenses made for this mount. Now, Sony has two types of A mount lenses: those made for full frame and those made for the APS-C crop cameras. Now, the APS-C lenses carry a DT designation on them. Now, I don't have any original A mount stuff here from Sony, but the DT stands for digital technology and specifies the lenses that are designed for cameras with the APS-C sensor. That's the smaller sensor from the full frame. Now, my guess is, since the first digital cameras were APS-C before they introduced the full frame, that's where the term digital technology comes from. Because this film camera right here from 1985 used 35mm film for full frame. But when they went to digital, they started using smaller digital sensors that were much tinier, and those became known as the APS-C sensors or the crop sensors. Now, it would make sense that Sony called those digital technology in their lenses, because that's essentially what it was when it came out. The lens's image circle will not cover the full 35mm image sensor, much like the Nikon DX, the Canon EF-SS, and the Sigma DC lenses. Now, they were already making full frame lenses for film, and in my research, I was unable to find any specific name for those lenses. However, they had a lot of different abbreviations and highlighting the main features of the lenses for them. So I want to get into that a little bit on the A mount side, just to be thorough in this video, and then we'll jump into E mount. Now, the first is SSM. This acronym stands for Sony Supersonic Motor. It uses a ring-tight piezoelectric motor that gives you extremely quiet, fast, and accurate autofocusing. These lenses have a distance scale built into the lens and have full manual override capability. Now, just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about with distance scale, it's an old Minolta lens from back in 1985 that's been around for a while, and Sony continued to use it for a few years. This lens has that distance scale built into it right here, and this scale adjusts when you rack focus manually on the lens. Now, I'll show you real quick one of the interesting things about this A mount. Take this adapter off. Is A mount right here has a little screw drive on it. This is what the camera actually controlled. So in an in-body autofocus system like this Maxim 7000 here, there's a screw drive that pops out of the A mount. It actually drives these lenses to give them autofocus, and the camera itself handled the autofocusing. Now, Sony did change that later on with some of their A mount lenses and gave them direct drive motors inside that were electronic. And you can see that even though the mount stayed exactly the same here, the gold contacts on top of the camera, there's 5 on this camera, which was the original design, And Sony, I think, expanded that to 8 with the introduction of autofocus and some other modern technologies. Whole contact set there that went on the newer lenses. All these lenses are basically manual control, or the camera can control them electronically. That's kind of a cool feature, is you can actually use these on E-mount with the adapter. And that adapter can come in various different things. The first one being one like this that I have, which is just strictly a manual adapter. And because it's manual, when you lock it on, you have manual focus control only, you have your manual zoom, and then it also had your aperture control on the adapter. Now this is a cheap photodiox adapter, and it doesn't offer any kind of connection to the E-mount. All it is just a mount for it. Now I can put this on my A7R II here and shoot pictures all day long with this in full manual. Thing that you got to think about is that you have to rack your aperture, and there's no way of knowing with this mount what that aperture's at. And if you buy one of those Sony mounts that are designed for their cameras for the A-mount stuff, it lets the camera actually control the aperture electronically. There's manual options out there. This is a cheap $25 adapter, and then you can buy the more expensive Sony ones that will adapt the lenses properly. Now the next lens we're going to talk about in the old A-mount stuff is the SAM lens. These lenses have the motor built into some of the lower end lenses released since 2009. It's sufficiently speedy and quiet, but it's not as good as the SSM was. The addition of SAM also usually indicates that the lens has a plastic build and is from a more affordable lineup. So let's get into the branding of the A-mount lenses. Now the G stands for gold and specifies Sony's best, highest quality, most expensive professional lenses in the A-mount lineup. G name carried over from the original Minolta stuff. Now the next designation you'll see is ZA. This is a Sony Zeiss Alpha branded lens. It's designed specifically for Sony cameras, and as far as high quality goes, these are on par with Sony's G lenses. Now the last designation, you may not find this acronym everywhere in the lens barrel that features it, is the STF, or the Smooth Transition Focus Lens. Now these lenses have a special, and I'm going to screw this up, APD, or apodization lens groups, and they're thicker toward the lens edges. Now these lenses give out a smooth focus highlight. Now let's get into the modern era of equipment. Sony released the E-mount back in 2010. The E stands for an 18mm flange distance of the E-mount cameras. And when Sony did this, they only made it for the new generation of small compact APS-C cameras called the NEX, or the new E-mount experience. The E-mount lenses are based off of two main groups. There's the E-mount, which is the APS-C lineup, and then there's the FE mount, which is a full frame line. Now, one of the most confusing things for people to find out when they're new to the brand is that all these lenses work on any of the E-mount cameras. But if you are shooting a full frame, be careful. What you buy when you're making a lens purchase, it's very important to know if you're buying an E-mount or an FE mount. If you put an E-mount lens on a full frame camera, the camera by default will switch to APS-C mode. While it does work and it takes photos all the same as it would if you own the crop sensor camera, you're losing resolution and not getting the full perspective as a full frame camera. The lenses themselves will have this written on them. The box will have an E-mount designation or the FE mount designation. Generally, the E-mount glass is much cheaper than FE mount glass, but be careful. Don't always trust the price, because Sony has been releasing some high-end E-mount lenses for the APS-C line that cost well above $1,000. Now this is kind of a mid-level camera that they came out with. This is the NEX5N. I want to say it's like second or third generation of the NEX line. As you can see, this is an incredibly small little camera. Came in silver. I think you can get them in black also. And Sony did make a bunch of silver lenses just for this lineup originally. You can still buy that silver stuff today. It's just not on every lens, and they are the older technology, but they do work well and take some nice photos still. Let me pop this lens off this camera. So this is an E-mount with an APS-C sensor in it. See, it's got the same gold contacts on the bottom here versus the A-mounts up on top. And then you've got the 18mm flange that they're talking about. The only thing I can figure is that's the distance from this flange to the actual image sensor in the center. Now, I haven't personally measured that, but by looking at it, I would say, yeah, I could see that being about 18mm or 3/4 of an inch or so. One of the things about like this camera is you can see it's an incredibly small little body for this mount. This E-mount right here can accept any of these E-mount lenses. So I have the kit lens it came with. This is an 18-55 standard lens kit, and it has, you can see on the back, the gold contacts on the bottom, and you can see once you pay close attention to the image receptacle on the back, or the image window that goes to the sensor. It's about the same size as the sensor. This is a key telling point that you're looking at a APS-C lens. The lenses, they would have an E-mount designation, and on a lot of these lenses, it's on the actual outer ring inside the filter thread. This is an E, and that's the designation you're looking for to determine it's a APS-C lens. Now then it goes into a 3.5-5.6/18-55 OSS. So 3.5, it's a variable aperture. This is pretty much standard like any camera lens, but if you're not familiar with it, 3.5 is the maximum aperture this lens has when zoomed back at 18mm. And then as you zoom it and extend the barrel, it becomes a 5.6 aperture. 18-55 is your millimeter focal distance range. So it's an 18 on the wide end and 55 on the telephoto end. And then OSS, this is another designation you'll see on Sony lenses. This OSS stands for optical steady shot. And that means that this lens inside it has a little bouncing gyro, or whatever you want to call it, that it stabilizes the image before it gets to the actual image sensor. And it works very, very well. This E-mount on this APS-C camera right here can take any one of these lenses. With the adapter, I can run this lens in manual mode on this camera. I got a 70-210 f4 lens. This is a 55-210 lens, and this is an APS-C lens. Again, notice the image circle on the back. It's much smaller. This is, like I said, again, a key telling point. Now this one will say E-mount, I believe in the same spot. Yep, on the front element. In the writing, it tells you it's an E-mount. This was designed for these little silver cameras originally back in the day. You get a nice little silver lens camera kit. Very nice, compact little setup. This is a variable aperture lens, but it's essentially the same lens as this one here. And you can see this being a full frame lens, how much larger it actually is than the APS-C variant. This lens will have a printed lens designation on the top of the lens or on the front element. It won't have any special markings on it or symbols on the housing. While these are more budget-friendly lenses in Sony's lineup, they can still be very good quality and should not be overlooked just because they are a standard or cheaper lens. Standard lens can be found in both the APS-C lineup as well as full frame lineup. I personally don't own any other standard lenses other than these little APS-C lenses. Boxes and what you're looking for when you're buying a lens, you're looking at a box. This is the box to the lens I have mounted to my A7R II right now. It'll say E-mount 35mm full frame. Right on the box, it says it there, twice, 3 times. 3 times on this box, it tells you it is a full frame lens. When you're buying a lens, always make sure if you're using a full frame camera that you're hopefully buying a full frame lens. You don't have to. All these APS-C lenses work just fine on Sony's full frame mirrorless cameras. There's a cost to that, and that's the loss of resolution. You're basically shooting the image that this camera would take. Now, if you get into, and I don't have a good box example for you, but if you get into an APS-C camera, you'll see it just says E-mount right here. And again, it says it there once on this box. That's the only spot I see it. If we look at this new A6000 in the box, it says E-mount. When Sony started making E-mount lenses and FE lenses, they made a few lenses that carry this blue Zeiss logo. And that logo, see right here on the box, Zeiss, as well as when you look at a lens that carries this, it'll carry this blue Zeiss logo right here on the side of the lens. Now don't be confused by this thinking it's a Zeiss lens. This is a Sony lens, 100% Sony, made to the standards of Zeiss. While Zeiss did not make these lenses themselves, Sony has a marketing relationship with Sony and builds the lenses to the standards of Zeiss build and quality, but they're not a true Zeiss lens. Most of the lenses that carry the Zeiss logo, however, are very good and have exceptional quality. However, some will say that there have been good copies and bad copies of these lenses. Myself personally own 2 of them, 55-1.8 Zeiss. In my personal opinion, every Sony shooter should have this lens in the bag, regardless of what you shoot, should have this lens. It's incredibly sharp. And I also own the 35-1.4. Both of my copies are exceptional, and I am blown away with how sharp and good these are. I've heard people say that they're soft, they're not good. And I think it's just take and give, and there probably are good copies and bad copies. I generally rule on the thumb of most people will complain about something that's bad, but will never praise something good. Feel of the controls on a Zeiss lens is top notch. Smooth focus ring. The 3514 has a very smooth and large autofocus ring. It also gives you the aperture ring that's clicked, and it can be de-clicked. These copies are really truly something else. I mean, they're very nice lenses. One of the things I'll show you real quick when you're talking full frame on that FE versus E mount, you'll see inside this lens element, it says this Distagon T is an FE, meaning it's a full frame lens. So just so you can see the difference on a full frame lens versus the APS-C lens, you can see the image window is much larger on the full frame versus the APS-C. One of the main key telling points whether or not you have a full frame lens or an APS-C lens. Now, I wouldn't say I trust that 100%. I haven't seen every Sony lens ever made, but that's definitely something to keep an eye out for. As far as the Zeiss goes, it gives you Distagon FE 1435 ZA. Even the E mounts are called ZA or Zeiss Alpha. It's a Sony lens built to Zeiss standards, and personally, I've never had a problem with the Zeiss. I think they're fantastic lenses, and they can be bought pretty affordably now. That being said, they are a little bit older technology compared to the new stuff coming out. The last point I want to make about Zeiss, so far Sony's made both APS-C and full frame lenses with the Zeiss badge. If I remember correctly, I believe there's a 16 to 70 f4 Zeiss lens designed just for APS-C cameras, and they also made a 24 millimeter APS-C Zeiss lens. I believe those are the only two. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure those are the only two APS-C Zeiss lenses out there. So remember back when I said there were several things that Sony continued to use from the Minolta era? Well, the G designation is one of them. The gold standard. Sony had a couple lenses with this designation early on in the E mount. The first, I believe, was the FE70-200 f4, and they also made one for APS-C that was the 18-105 power zoom lens that carried a G designation. Since those lenses have been released, and everyone after it has all been extraordinary. They are so good, in fact, that they are right next to Sony's true professional lineup. It's not the exact same quality, just priced a bit different and cheaper, maybe marketed a little bit differently. The G lens can be identified by this G designation on the side of it. I happen to have my G lens here, which is the 24-105 f4. Now you can find this designation right on the side of the barrel. It'll be this G logo, and it's surrounded by a black surround, and that is a Sony G lens. So far, they have been both APS-C and full frame lenses that carry this G designation. Sony has released some really high-end APS-C lenses with the G designation that some are upwards of $1,500. So now it's time for the Sony GM, or the G Master series of lenses. These are the lenses that Sony say have to have the resoluting power to go to 100 megapixels. Sony started making camera sensors with such high megapixel ratings, with the current lenses out, they couldn't resolve the image quality well enough to take full advantage of that image sensor, and it would actually leave you with a less sharp or blurry. Sony came up with the GM line. It's a little bit of marketing, and it's a little bit of a name play, I think, on the lenses themselves. So many of the new lenses are capable of running on the R series of cameras at 60 megapixels or higher, but the GM was marketed originally saying these are the lenses that can go to 100 megapixel. This is where the GM line comes into play. Lenses promise to last years since they have the best image resoluting power. Build quality and optics are definitely top of the line. However, the look and feel is practically identical to the G lenses they make. This is the 85 millimeter 1.4. Again, on these lenses, including the G, the bodies, the feel, the rings, everything about them is pretty much identical. Now, I know I'm not comparing apples to apples here just exactly. One of the things you'll notice on the G lenses is they have this nice little badge on top that tells you that FE for 24-105G OSS, and then on the GMs they have a similar badge, FE1485GM. So that's really the only designation difference, is you got a GM versus the G lens, G Master. Other than some marketing differences, there are some better optics in the G Master lenses. They did give them some more coatings or have more special glass in them, and that is one of the differences you'll find in the lenses for the price. So you're not just paying for the name, you are getting something a little bit extra. The other thing the G Master lenses have that so far no other lenses have had have been locking hood rings or tulips, whatever you want to call them. They have an actual physical lock button on them that locks it to the lens when you twist it on. The insides are felt coated, so a little bit, higher quality, I'd say. Rubber tip surrounds. This is all rubber tipped. And then the last thing they give you, which I think I have one in this bag or in this box, is every G Master lens I've seen and had come with this fancy little bag. And you can see I keep mine right there in the box all the time. But they give you this nice little lens carry bag, and it comes with a little shoulder strap, and it's all my original bagging for the lens. And I've never ever used one. Actually, I take that back. I did transport one time, and we used the bag to transport it till it made from one camera bag to the next camera bag. So I did use one once, but you could be the guy putting it right on your hip through the belt loop. Keep your G Master right there. That's how they would run. I don't think I could do that. So the bag stays in the box, brand new and pristine, for the next guy to buy it. It's got all the original stuff. That's what I do. One of the things that really stands out on the G Master lenses is the box. When you're buying a G Master lens, the box is black with an orange side. Any other lens you buy comes with an orange box right now. And like I said earlier, one of the other side notes that kind of comes to mind is APS-C boxes are generally white for the cameras, where the full frames are black like the G Master box. So when you see black boxes, you're getting more top of the line, I guess. That makes sense? Probably not, but that's what they got. So you can tell a G Master lens by the side logo is lit up in orange, which also matches the full frame ring on the A7 series cameras, or the A9, I believe the A1 also, but they have this orange ring on the full frame sensor versus just a silver ring on all the APS-C cameras. So far, only full frame lenses have carried the GM designation. I'm hoping, and I always have hoped, that they would make really good high quality APS-C glass. Now they kind of did do that with APS-C and give us some really nice, constant aperture 2.8 G lenses for APS-C, but I always thought it'd be cool to have a little G Master trifecta to carry on APS-C. Was actually branded G Master optics for the APS-C sensors. And I'd hope that the next generation APS-C cameras, maybe we get something like that, because I think they're deserving of it. I mean, I actually really enjoy shooting with APS-C over full frame for the size benefit, and it's just that much smaller and lighter to pack. All right, so I know this video has been a little long, but I hope with all this it brings some clarity to the lenses lineup that Sony have. If you find yourself looking for a new Sony lens for your camera, make sure you know if it's an E mount or FE mount to match the sensor you're shooting with. Otherwise, you really can't go wrong with any of them. They're all really good lenses, even the standard lenses. Don't be deterred by buying one just because it's a cheaper standard lens and not a fancy G or G Master. The standard lenses are really good, and they do work very well. And as the newer ones are released, they're getting the same newer technology that the higher end lenses are getting. Thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. So if you have any questions about anything I've discussed here tonight with all this mess I gotta put away now, if you have any questions about that, hit me up in the comments below. I do try to always answer everyone's questions. I try to get to you as soon as I can. And with that, if you like this video, hit that like button. It's incredibly important to this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys. Talk to you later.